The courtroom falls silent the moment she speaks. My father runs this city, so let's not waste time. 22-year-old Briana Kane leans back in her chair, designer jacket still on, as if this were an inconvenience, not a hearing. Across from her, Judge Frank Caprio doesn't flinch. He's seen anger, fear, regret, but this is something different. Entitlement staring the law in the eye. What Briana doesn't know is that in a few minutes, the entire room will hear a body cam recording that could shatter her shield of privilege and drag a powerful police chief into the light. Before we press play on that audio, I want to know something from you. Where are you watching from? And what time is it right now in your world? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe courts should never bow to family connections, hit subscribe. Because what's about to happen to Briana Kane will test one question. When power talks, will justice finally talk back? The story of that morning began long before Briana Kane strutted into Judge Caprio's courtroom with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. It started on a narrow commercial block off Hartford Avenue, where delivery trucks squeezed into tight spaces, and every minute mattered. The air smelled of diesel and roasted coffee from a nearby cafe. Workers hustled in and out of back entrances, and the city's pulse beat in predictable rhythm until one car disrupted all of it. Miguel Santos had been on the road since 4:45 a.m. His delivery manifest was printed, folded in thirds, and starting to fray at the edges from sweat and handling. He was in the middle of a tight delivery window, a 30-minute slot granted by the city, a slot he'd waited 3 weeks to secure for a high-value client. One missed window didn't just mean a schedule setback. It meant losing the contract and forfeiting the penalty fee. For Miguel, a father of two with a mortgage and a mother undergoing chemo, that fee hurt, but Miguel didn't complain. He parked his truck exactly where the permit allowed, flipped on the hazard lights, and noted the time, 10:58 a.m. For a moment, it seemed the day might stay under control. Then the hum of a luxury SUV cut through the block like a blade. A navy blue Range Rover rolled up, music thumping. The driver didn't slow to read the street signs. She didn't look at the permit on Miguel's windshield. Instead, she threw the wheel sharply and slid into the tiny space behind Miguel's truck, completely blocking his exit. The door swung open. Out stepped Briana Kane, phone in hand, sunglasses on, expression already annoyed. When Miguel jogged toward her, waving politely, she didn't even let him speak. "I need to be here 5 minutes," she snapped. "You're taking up half the block." Miguel tried to explain. "Ma'am, this zone is for deliveries only. I have a city permit." She lifted her sunglasses, as if inspecting an insect. "And?" "I'm paying taxes that keep the street alive. If anyone has the right to be here, it's me." Miguel pointed at the clearly posted delivery-only permit required sign. Briana didn't even glance at it. Instead, she turned away, tapping her phone. "I'm not moving the car," she said. "It's not my job to babysit your logistics." Miguel checked his watch. 5 minutes left before the window tightened. He could feel the pressure building, the kind that wrapped around a man's chest and made breathing harder. "Please," he tried again. "I could lose my job." She gave a breathy little laugh, the kind meant to dismiss someone entirely. "That's not my problem." Miguel stepped away and called non-emergency dispatch. The operator was calm, professional. "We'll send someone." At 11:12 a.m., Officer Luis Navarro arrived, stepping out of his patrol car with the quiet steadiness of someone who had handled far worse than parking disputes. His uniform was crisp, badge polished, every movement deliberate. "Ma'am," he said gently, "this is a permitted delivery zone. You're obstructing it. I need you to move the vehicle." Briana didn't bother looking up from her screen. "Yeah, I heard you." "And you'll move the car?" he asked. She turned, finally meeting his eyes cold, irritated. "Maybe when I'm done." Officer Navarro remained calm. "Ma'am, the driver has a limited delivery window. You're required to relocate now." Now, Briana raised her phone and snapped a picture of his badge. "Oh, I know the rules. And I also know my father." Chief Kane won't be thrilled when he hears some rookie is hassling his daughter. Miguel saw the shift officer. Navarro's jaw tightened just slightly. A reaction from a man trained not to react. That told Miguel more than words could. When Navarro began writing the citation, Briana rolled her eyes dramatically. "This is ridiculous. Enjoy traffic school duty," she said, the words dripping with the confidence of someone who truly believed she couldn't be touched. The body cam footage captured it all. Miguel stood in the background, hopelessness pooling in his stomach as seconds ticked past his delivery window. The job was already gone. He could feel it. Navarro finished writing the citation and handed it over. Briana snatched it without reading. The SUV's tires squealed as she sped off, making Miguel jump back just to avoid getting clipped by the bumper. As the dust settled, Miguel looked at Navarro, exhausted. "Officer, thank you for helping. Sorry this turned into a whole thing." Navarro shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong," Miguel almost said, "but you'll get away with it." He didn't. People like him didn't say things like that. They just swallowed them. He loaded his truck and drove off to rework his route, wondering how he'd explain the missed window to his supervisor. Navarro returned to his patrol car, wrote up the incident report, and filed the evidence. He didn't know that within 30 minutes, his department's internal lines would light up. He didn't know that Chief Kane's office would leave 2 missed calls and a voicemail for the court. He didn't know that this case, just another entry in his daily log, would soon become the most watched hearing in months. What he did know was simple. The law had been broken. A worker had been harmed. An officer had been threatened. And someone believed they were above consequences. Hours later, back in Judge Caprio's courtroom, none of that weight seemed to touch Briana. She sat casually, arms crossed, tapping her acrylic nails on the table. Her attorney, Aaron Cho, leaned toward her, whispering, "Let me do the talking. We can settle this fast." "Yeah, whatever," Briana muttered, but Judge Caprio, studying her with calm precision, already sensed the truth. This wasn't about a parking spot. This was about a pattern, a belief system built on doors, opened by the power of someone else's uniform. And what neither Briana nor her attorney knew was that Judge Caprio had spent years carving out a courtroom where privilege didn't get the final word. As the clerk stepped forward to read the charges, as cameras blinked red in silent readiness, as the audience leaned in, they all sensed something electric in the air. This wasn't going to be a routine hearing. It was going to be a reckoning. The clerk's voice sliced through the tension like a blade. Commonwealth versus Briana Elise Kane. Charges: disorderly conduct, obstruction of a permitted delivery zone, interference and intimidation directed at an officer during lawful duty. Each word echoed across the courtroom, bouncing off oak walls and settling heavily around Briana. She shifted in her chair. But the movement was more irritation than discomfort, like someone bothered by a long line at a cafe. Not someone facing a legal reckoning. Judge Frank Caprio folded his hands. "Miss Kane, did you receive the citation at the scene?" Briana didn't hesitate. "I did." "And did you read it?" "I glanced at it. That is not the same thing." Before she could retort, her attorney, Aaron Cho, rose. She styled herself as every bit the polished negotiator's leak charcoal suit. Voice calm, hands clasped professionally. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to resolve this matter today. We're willing to pay all fines and put this behind us." She said it like offering a settlement on a scratched rental car. Caprio's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in that quiet way he had when someone tried to skip past the truth. "Ms. Cho," he said softly, "this courtroom is not a place where money dissolves responsibility. It is not a payment portal where outcomes can be bought. We address facts here." Aaron hesitated, lips tightening. She sat down without further argument. Caprio tapped his pen once. "Officer Navarro, please, read your narrative into the record." Officer Luis Navarro stepped forward, posture straight but not rigid, like someone who respected authority because he respected the institution, not because he feared it. He began. At 11:12 a.m., I responded to a call regarding a vehicle obstructing a permitted delivery zone on Hartford Avenue. Upon arrival, I observed a blue Range Rover parked directly behind a commercial delivery truck displaying a valid municipal permit. Briana snorted softly. Navarro continued unfazed. The driver, identified as Miss Briana Kane, was standing near the truck, arguing with the delivery driver. I informed her she was obstructing a permitted zone. She refused to move. She then photographed my badge and stated, quote, "My father won't be happy about this. He'll bury you in paperwork." Briana leaned forward. That was sarcasm. Navarro turned toward her. Polite but firm. "I perceived it as a threat, Your Honor." Caprio gestured toward the bailiff. "Play the body cam audio." A hiss of static filled the speaker. Then Briana's crisp voice. "Enjoy traffic school duty, Navarro." The sound was venomous in its confidence. Even some spectators shifted uncomfortably. Caprio waited for silence to settle, for the weight of those words to fill the air. Then he asked, "Miss Kane, is that your voice?" "Yes," she snapped. "But that doesn't mean it means exactly what it sounds like," he interrupted gently. Aaron Cho stood again, slightly more cautious now. "Your Honor, we object to emotional context being introduced." The comment was frustration, not intimidation. Caprio shook his head. "Counselor, harm is not only injury. It is also the disruption of lawful process. It includes fear, pressure, and interference." He looked at Briana. "Most citizens do not photograph badge numbers. Most do not invoke a family member's rank. Most do not imply retaliation." Aaron swallowed. "Your Honor, my client has no criminal record." "I did not ask about her record," he said calmly. "I asked whether she acknowledges the facts." Caprio turned to the clerk. "Miss Rivera, were there any contacts made to the court regarding this case prior to the hearing?" The clerk flipped through a log. "Yes, Your Honor. 3 attempts within an hour of the citation, 2 missed calls, and 1 voicemail, all from a number registered to the Office of the Chief of Police." A ripple moved across the audience. "Play the voicemail," Caprio instructed. A male voice, controlled. Official played through the courtroom speakers. "This is calling from Chief Kane's office regarding case number 24-9914. We would like to discuss the matter and explore resolution options before it escalates. Please return the call." Briana's face went stark for the first time. "I didn't ask him to call," she blurted. "I didn't." Caprio nodded. "Maybe not." But someone believed it would help. Miguel Santos was then called by phone. His voice came through steady, humble. "I had a 30-minute permit window, Your Honor. When Miss Kane blocked my exit, I missed it. That cost me the job. I'm not asking for money, just fairness. Delivery drivers follow the rules. We just need others to follow them too." Briana muttered under her breath. "He should have planned better." Everyone heard it. Caprio lifted an eyebrow. "Miss Kane," he said, "you may speak to the court clearly. I do not allow commentary murmured like an aside in a theater." She exhaled loudly. "Fine. I said he should have planned better. That's all." "Mr. Santos did plan," Caprio replied. "He had a permit. You didn't. He followed the rules. You obstructed them." He turned back to the evidence stack. "Additionally, Miss Rivera, please read the text submitted by prosecution." The clerk read aloud, "From Briana Kane to an unnamed contact. 11:26 a.m. Got cited, Dad will handle it." "Don't stress." Briana's jaw tightened. "That was private." "It became discoverable," Caprio said, "and it speaks to expectation." Briana's attorney tried once more. "Your Honor, we request the rest of this hearing be handled off the public calendar. There may be media attention." "The remedy for bias is sunlight," Caprio said firmly, "not shadows." Then he leaned forward. "Miss Kane, I will ask you 3 yes or no questions." Briana stiffened. "Did you obstruct a permitted delivery zone?" "Yes." Did you photograph Officer Navarro's badge and invoke your father's position? A pause. I took a picture. That is not a no. Did you invoke your father's office? Yes. Did you make a statement that Officer Navarro reasonably perceived as a threat to his assignment? She swallowed hard. I said it sarcastically. That is also not a no. The courtroom was silent. Caprio's voice lowered, carrying more force than shouting ever could. You are not being targeted, Miss Kane. You are being held accountable. Most people do not have police chiefs for fathers. Most people do not expect phone calls to the court to alter outcomes. That is not targeting. That is consequence. Briana stared at the table, her facade finally beginning to crack. Erin Cho sat frozen, her legal playbook suddenly useless. Officer Navarro stood with quiet dignity near the wall, just a man who had done his job and faced pressure for it. Miguel Santos remained on the line, listening. Everyone waited. Caprio closed the file slowly, deliberately. Accountability, he said softly, gets quiet so truth can be heard. Then, with simple clarity, he delivered his finding. All charges are supported by the evidence. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more important, something Briana Kane would never forget. The courtroom felt heavier now, as if the air itself understood what came next. Judge Caprio didn't rush. He never did. He let silence do what lectures could not force reflection. Briana Kane, who had swaggered in with the confidence of royalty, now sat stiff as stone. Her jaw clenched, eyes lowered, fingers twisting the gold bracelet on her wrist. Caprio lifted a second file, thinner than the first, but lined with sticky notes. He spoke with the tone of someone recalling an unpleasant truth. Miss Kane, before we continue with sentencing considerations, I want to revisit something historical. Briana's eyes flickered upward, a mix of surprise and dread. Last year, Caprio continued, you received an administrative warning at the university parking your vehicle in a reserved spot intended for ADA access near the engineering building. Briana's lips parted, then shut again. She hadn't expected that to surface. Erin Cho stood quickly. Your Honor, that matter was dismissed at the campus level. It wasn't a violation of municipal law. It wasn't dismissed, Caprio corrected calmly. It simply disappeared. Not by due process, by influence. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Someone in the back whispered, that figures. Caprio tapped the file. The complaint was filed by a disabled graduate student who needed loading dock access for equipment. For nearly an hour, he couldn't get through, and Miss Kane moved her vehicle only when campus security approached. He closed the folder gently, almost sadly. That wasn't punishment, Miss Kane. That was a whisper, one you chose not to hear. Briana looked stunned, her face pale, her composure unraveling. For the first time, she seemed to realize that the walls she thought protected her were now closing in. Caprio leaned back. Privilege hides consequence, Miss Kane. Until privilege is examined. Before anyone could speak, the heavy courtroom doors creaked open. Every head turned. There, in full uniform, shoulders squared with the unmistakable bearing of authority, stood Chief Harold Kane, Briana's father. A hush fell instantly. His silver hair was combed sharply. His badge gleamed. He walked with the practiced stride of a man used to being obeyed. As he approached the front, Briana straightened instinctively, her chin lifting in a mixture of relief and embarrassment. Chief Kane stopped near the defense table. Your Honor, he said, his low voice filling the room. I request a moment to discuss this matter privately for the sake of departmental integrity. Caprio didn't rise. He watched him the way a lighthouse watches an approaching storm unmoved. Chief Kane, this is an active hearing, he said. You may observe, but you may not intervene off the record. I'm not asking for special treatment. The chief's jaw tensed. I'm asking to resolve the situation discreetly. Public scrutiny over a minor incident doesn't serve the community. Caprio's voice softened, but carried more weight. Quiet resolutions are how patterns survive, Chief. This courtroom operates publicly, like every other case. A murmur of agreement rose from the gallery. Briana looked torn, mortified. Her father was here, desperate for him to fix everything, and ashamed that she wanted him to. "Dad, stop," she whispered. "Please, this isn't helping." The chief turned to her, startled. It was the first time she had ever told him to step back. The tiniest crack formed in his mask of command. Caprio watched the exchange with perceptive calm. "Chief," he said, "your daughter has counsel. She has a voice. Let her use it." For a moment, it seemed Chief Kane might resist. His fingers flexed, his jaw worked, but then slowly he stepped back, retreating to the last row of spectators. His boots sounded heavy against the floor, as though each step peeled away a layer of control he was used to holding. Brianna's shoulders sagged. She looked small for the first time. Human. Caprio resumed. "Miss Kane, we must address the larger implication of your actions. Officer Navarro was placed in a position where enforcing the law invited potential retaliation. That is unacceptable." Officer Navarro remained near the side wall, steady. But his eyes were tired. The past weeks had not been easy. Caprio continued, "Your actions risked undermining public trust, endangered a delivery worker's livelihood, and sent a message that law applies differently to those with connections." He paused. "I need to know what happened from your perspective. And I need you to speak honestly, not with sarcasm, not with entitlement, but with truth." Briana swallowed hard. Her throat bobbed. She wiped her palms on her designer pants. I was frustrated," she said quietly. "Why? Because I couldn't find parking. Because I was late. Because I thought the rules didn't apply to me." The confession was soft, but it landed like a boulder. Caprio nodded. "And why did you think that?" Silence stretched. Briana hesitated. The courtroom held its breath. Finally, she murmured, "Because someone has always helped me. My dad. My family. People look at our name, and doors open." Her father closed his eyes. Caprio leaned forward, his gaze firm but not unkind. "There is a difference, Miss Kane, between opportunity and exemption. Opportunity is earned. Exemption is stolen from the people who play by the rules." He tapped his pen once. "Now, before we move to corrective action, I want to hear from the people affected. Officer Navarro, would you please stand?" Navarro stepped forward. His voice remained steady. "Your Honor, I wasn't harmed physically. But I hesitated the next time I had to cite someone with connections. I wondered if I'd be reassigned, or if someone would call again. That hesitation is dangerous, not just for me," he glanced at Briana, "but for the community." The honesty stung. Briana blinked quickly, fighting something she'd never been forced to feel. Accountability. Caprio thanked him, and then addressed the courtroom at large. "This is not simply about a citation. This is about restoring balance where privilege has tilted the scale." He turned to Briana. "What you did was not a mistake. It was a mindset, and mindsets can be changed but only with effort." The room seemed to hold its breath. "What happens next?" Caprio said. "We'll determine whether this becomes a turning point, or just another headline." Briana trembled slightly. Aaron Cho looked tense but silent. Chief Kane stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the back of the bench in front of him. Caprio folded his hands. "Miss Kane, the court is prepared to issue a restorative accountability plan." But he wasn't finished. "And it will be unlike anything you have ever faced." The weight of those words fell over the courtroom like a final warning. A reckoning was about to begin, and for the first time, Briana Kane understood no one could shield her now. Judge Frank Caprio placed both hands on the bench in front of him. The wood worn smooth from decades of decisions, merciful ones, stern ones, and the kind few judges were brave enough to deliver. This, unmistakably, would be the latter. The courtroom leaned forward, as if gravity itself pulled them toward what the judge was about to say. "Miss Kane," Caprio began, I want you to understand something very clearly before I continue. He let the words settle. The law does not exist to intimidate, nor does it exist to be bent by influence. It exists to create balance, and balance is restored only when truth is faced head-on. Briana swallowed hard. For the first time, she didn't have a snide comment, or a sarcastic eye roll, or a withering smirk. She looked like someone bracing for a storm she never imagined would hit her life. Caprio lifted the original citation sheet. Your base fines total $540. A few whispers rose in the gallery. Disorderly conduct $150. Obstruction of a permitted zone $300. Interference with an officer during lawful duty $90. Briana exhaled, half in shock, half in relief. Fines were expected. She could pay those with a single swipe of her father's credit card. But Caprio's voice deepened. I am staying a portion of that amount, $320 contingent on the full completion of a restorative accountability plan. Her eyebrows shot up. What does that mean? It means, Caprio answered gently, that money alone will not absolve you. He continued, voice steady and firm. Paying a fine teaches you how to write a check. Accountability teaches you how to become someone better. Aaron Cho shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. Even she knew there was no quick exit left in this case. Caprio took a breath. Here is the plan. Every pen in the courtroom stopped moving. Miguel Santos, still on the phone line, inhaled slowly. Officer Navarro braced himself. Even Chief Kane lowered his chin as if preparing to absorb the blow his daughter was about to receive. First, Caprio said, you will deliver a genuine written apology to both Officer Navarro and Mr. Santos. He held up a finger. Not a press release, not a template, not a statement drafted by an attorney. A real apology, written in your own words. It must articulate what you did, how it affected them, and what you understand now that you did not understand then. Briana bit her lip. A written apology? That's fine. I can do that. You will also deliver the apology in person if they agree to meet. If either declines, it will be mailed and filed with the court. Her confidence wavered. Second, Caprio continued, you will complete 160 hours of community service. The courtroom stirred. That was a significant increase from what most defendants received. Caprio held up another finger. 80 of those hours will be with the Providence Police Department Community Relations Division. You will assist with resident support calls, permit education, safety workshops, scheduling liaison tasks, and general administrative duties. He paused. The other 80 hours will be performed with the Municipal Delivery Coalition. This includes working alongside delivery drivers, observing their duties, loading and unloading goods, and witnessing firsthand the impact of delivery schedules and restricted zones. Briana's jaw dropped. You want me to work with delivery drivers? Yes, Caprio replied. Humility is not learned from a bench seat in a courtroom. It is learned standing beside those whose lives your actions interrupted. Her father's face tightened, but he didn't argue. Third, Caprio said, you will assist in organizing 4 public workshops related to accessible zones, delivery permits, and the real-life impact of obstruction on working citizens and emergency services. He tapped his pen. No cameras, no social media, no curated image, only service. A flush crept across Briana's cheeks. The line between embarrassment and awakening began to blur. Fourth, the judge continued, you will write a public service announcement script for teen drivers about compliance and respect during traffic stops. Briana blinked. A script? Yes. And you will perform the voiceover for the final PSA. No branding, no references to your family. Just the truth. Even Erin looked startled. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to object, but one look from Caprio silenced her. Fifth, Caprio said, you will participate in one overnight ride-along with the Providence Police Department. A shift selected at random. You will see firsthand the consequences of emergency delays, obstructed routes, and officer hesitation. Briana's breath hitched. The idea of spending a night in a patrol car, witnessing the darkest hours of the city, shook her more than any fine ever could. And finally, Caprio concluded, "You will submit a written reflection, 1,000 words, on the difference between borrowed power and earned responsibility." He leaned forward, voice low. Because borrowed power fades the moment privilege is questioned, but responsibility stays with you for life. The courtroom was dead silent. Then Caprio added something unexpected. "I want to make this clear. I am not punishing you for who your father is. I am holding you accountable for who you chose to be." A lump rose in Briana's throat. Her voice cracked. "This is a lot." "Yes," Caprio said gently. "Growth often is." Briana wiped her eye quickly, pretending it itched, pretending it wasn't emotion, pretending she wasn't unraveling. "Your Honor," she whispered. "What if I mess up?" Caprio's expression softened with something almost paternal. "Then you try again. Accountability doesn't demand perfection. It demands sincerity." Aaron placed a reassuring hand on Briana's arm. "We accept the terms, Your Honor." But Caprio wasn't done. He shifted in his seat, adopting the authoritative posture that meant something bigger was coming, not just for Briana, but for the entire city. "On the record," he said, "I am making several recommendations to the Municipal Court Administration and the Providence Police Department." Chief Kane stiffened. Caprio began listing them. An ex parte influence log will be created for all incoming cases. Any attempt, intentional or otherwise, to influence a case through external communication will be documented and made publicly accessible. Chief Kane's shoulders dropped an inch. A recusal or supervisor co-sign protocol will be implemented whenever command-level offices contact active case personnel. A delivery zone escalation guide will be established to prevent future obstructions and ensure neutral enforcement. A clerk hotline will allow staff to report intimidation or influence attempts anonymously. And finally, Caprio added, a retaliation shield procedure will protect officers like Navarro who uphold the law without fear of punitive reassignment. Every word tightened the room like a vice. These weren't symbolic measures. They were institutional change. Briana's father looked both exposed and humbled, but he didn't stand. He didn't argue. He knew what this moment meant, not just for his daughter, but for the department he led. Caprio rested his hands again on the bench. "Miss Kane," he said softly, "mercy is not a discount. It is a contract, and you just signed one." Briana nodded, eyes wet, voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." She wasn't the same girl who had walked in. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the moment her life pivoted away from entitlement and toward something real. The transformation did not begin with a grand gesture. It never does. Change crept into Briana's life quietly, in uncomfortable moments that stripped away her pride, piece by piece. The morning after the hearing, she stood in front of her closet, staring at rows of designer coats and immaculately tailored dresses, and realized none of them were suited for what she had to do. Community service didn't care about fashion. Delivery work didn't care about brand names. She finally settled on a plain hoodie and jeans. Even in casual clothes, she felt overdressed. Her first assignment with the Providence Police Department's Community Relations Division began at 8 a.m. sharp. She arrived at 7:59. Officer Martinez, a patient middle-aged woman with warm eyes but a professional firmness, greeted her with a clipboard. "You're here for the administrative rotation, right? Sign in. Phones go in the locker." Her tone wasn't hostile, but it wasn't impressed either. Briana hesitated. "Do I really have to put my phone away?" "Yes," Martinez said. "Community service hours are for service, not scrolling." Reluctantly, Briana placed her phone in the metal locker. The door shutting behind it felt like a part of her old life being locked away. The office buzzed with calls, residents reporting damaged street signs, requesting permit clarifications, asking about event parking rules. For the first few hours, Briana answered phones mechanically. Most callers were irritated, stressed, or confused. At 11:15 a.m., Briana received a call from an older woman who sounded exhausted. "I got another ticket outside my doctor's appointment. I have a disability placard. I don't understand what I did wrong." Briana checked the system. The placard was valid. The violation wasn't. She flagged the error and spoke gently to genuinely gently for the first time to a stranger. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry that happened. I'm going to forward this to the review team right away so they can correct it." There was a pause on the line. "Thank you," the woman whispered. "People usually rush me off the phone." For some reason, that sentence lingered. Briana sat still long after the call ended. It was the first time she wondered whether she had ever listened to anyone outside her bubble. By the end of the week, she had logged 14 hours. Her back hurt. Her head hurt. She was exhausted in ways she couldn't remember feeling before. But she showed up. Week 2 introduced her to something far more challenging: ride-alongs with delivery drivers. When she arrived at the municipal loading hub, she half expected people to glare at her, whisper, or treat her coldly. She wouldn't have blamed them. Her face had circulated in small online corners, not widely but enough that a few people had opinions. But Miguel Santos wasn't among them. He stood next to his truck, coffee in hand, wearing a faded jacket and a cap pulled low to block the sun. When Briana approached, he offered a small nod. "You ready?" Briana nodded back, unsure what to say. Miguel handed her a pair of work gloves. "They're clean," he added, "but worn in. Makes the lifting easier." She slipped them on. They smelled faintly of cardboard and detergent. The day began with loading crates, heavy ones stacked with cleaning supplies for a school and boxes of canned food for a community pantry. Briana's arms trembled after just 5 minutes. She tried hiding it by adjusting her stance, but Miguel noticed. "Bend your knees when you lift," he said. "You're fighting the weight instead of using it." She followed his instructions. It helped. Not enough to make the work easy, but enough to teach her humility. For 3 hours, they lifted, stacked, strapped down pallets, secured crates, and double-checked the manifest. Miguel moved with a fluid rhythm that came from experience. Briana stumbled, fumbled, and apologized more times than she'd ever apologized in her life. At the first stop, nursing home, Miguel hurried to meet the delivery window. "This one is strict," he said. "If we're late, the kitchen won't get supplies for the day." Briana felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't stop imagining what would have happened if someone had blocked Miguel's truck that morning. How many people would have missed meals? How many staff would have been stressed? How long the ripple would spread? When they finished the route, Miguel wiped sweat from his forehead. "You did good today." Briana looked at him surprised. "I slowed you down." "Yeah," he said, "but you tried." She didn't know why that made her eyes sting. She tried. 2 words she hadn't heard since elementary school, when effort mattered more than image. Not every day was that encouraging. Some workshops were tense. Some residents questioned the sincerity of a police chief's daughter teaching them about parking fairness. Some delivery drivers glared at her, not cruelly, but with the quiet judgment of people who'd been overlooked their whole lives by people exactly like her. And there were nights when Briana went home frustrated, embarrassed, even angry. But she still showed up again each morning. The hardest night came halfway through the ride-along requirement. She shadowed Officer Navarro. He didn't speak much at first, professional distance, nothing more. They drove through dimly lit neighborhoods, responding to calls. Not violent crimes, just the kind of everyday emergencies she'd never thought twice about. A mother locked out of her apartment. A man threatening to jump from a bridge railing. A fire hydrant blocked by an illegally parked car, slowing the response to a kitchen fire. A paramedic team waiting as officers navigated around clogged traffic. Navarro explained while driving. Seconds matter. Sometimes one bad parking decision can change the whole outcome. Briana sat in silence. realizing how small her former worldview had been. Then came the call that would stay with her forever. A stroke victim, apartment building, paramedics stuck behind a delivery van that wasn't actually allowed to park there. The van wasn't even blocking the front door. It was blocking the stretch where the stretcher would fit. The paramedics shouted for help as they maneuvered around it. Every second lost felt like a sin. Briana watched the medics haul the stretcher, watched a family sob in the hallway, watched time gallop ahead of them. When they finally cleared the patient through the bottleneck, the medic whispered, "If we lose him, I'm going to lose sleep over this." Briana stood frozen, her heart hammering. In that instant, she understood. Obstruction wasn't about inconvenience. It was about life, death, and dignity. She didn't speak the rest of the shift. When Navarro dropped her off at the station near dawn, he paused before she exited the car. "You're learning," he said. It wasn't praise, it was acknowledgement. And somehow, that meant more. 2 months passed. Briana completed 60 hours with the Delivery Coalition, 40 with Community Relations, several workshops, and an early draft of her teen driver PSA script, which the court sent back with red ink. Too polished, the note read, "Not enough truth." For the first time in her life, Briana rewrote something not to impress, but to be honest. By week 9, even her father noticed a change. She came home quieter, more thoughtful. Once, he found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of gloves from her delivery shifts. "You don't have to keep doing this," Chief Kane said softly. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady. "I do." He didn't argue. He just sat beside her, the gulf between them shifting smaller now. Her reflection paper took 3 nights to write. When she finished, her eyes were red, her hands shaking. It was the most personal thing she'd ever put on paper. By the time her final workshop ended, Briana had logged 153 hours. She needed only 7 more to complete the requirement. But she stayed for 9. She didn't want to stop. Something in her had cracked open, and something new had begun to grow. And as week 10 approached, she prepared to return to the courtroom, not as the untouchable girl who once threatened an officer, but as someone who now understood the weight of the world she had once casually disrupted. Her story wasn't over, but she was no longer running from it. 4 months after the hearing that upended her life, Briana Kane walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom again. But this time, she was almost unrecognizable, quiet, composed, without the designer bag or gleaming sunglasses she once treated like armor. She carried only a plain folder containing her service logs, written apologies, workshop certificates, the PSA script, and the 1,000-word reflection the judge required. There was no entourage behind her, no father in uniform at her side, no attorney guiding her movements, just Briana. The gallery, half filled with curious observers, whispered softly. Some people had followed her story since the clip circulated online bodycam audio, the quote that made headlines, the dramatic moment when Chief Kane marched into the courtroom only to be told to step back. Now they watched her return not as a symbol of privilege, but as someone trying to prove she had outgrown it. Judge Caprio entered, robe flowing, expression neutral but watchful. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at the docket. "Miss Briana Kane," he called. Briana stepped forward. "Good morning, Your Honor." He glanced at her folder. "I've reviewed your submissions. They're thorough." "Thank you, Your Honor." "But I want to hear from you directly," he continued. "Before I sign off on anything, I want you to summarize your reflection for the court. No reading, no notes. Tell us what you learned." The request was gentle, but the pressure behind it was immense. Briana took a slow breath. When we first met, she began softly. "I thought obstruction was just about parking. I thought it was about convenience. I thought doing what I did wouldn't matter beyond a small argument." She swallowed. "But then I realized it matters to everyone except the person causing the problem." She let that truth hang in the air. "When I blocked Miguel's truck, I didn't just make him late," she continued. "I cost him a job. That job meant something to his family. and my attitude told him he wasn't important not because he did anything wrong, but because of who I am. Her voice cracked slightly. She didn't hide it. When I photographed Officer Navarro's badge and mentioned my father, I wasn't being sarcastic. I was using power that wasn't mine. I was using fear. And I didn't even think about how that would affect his ability to do his job or how many officers hesitate when dealing with people like me. Officers shouldn't have to worry about retaliation for enforcing the law. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. And I learned something else, Briana said. Something about myself. She looked down, then up again, forcing herself to continue. I've spent most of my life assuming someone would clean up my mistakes, that if I messed up, there was a safety net. My father was always trying to protect me, and I used that protection as an excuse to avoid responsibility. She blinked fast, holding back tears. But privilege isn't protection. It's blindness. It stopped me from seeing other people, and from seeing myself clearly. Silence filled the room, a different kind of silence than months ago. Not heavy, just honest. Judge Caprio leaned forward, and what changed that viewpoint? She inhaled deeply, working with the Delivery Coalition, listening to residents, seeing emergency calls during the ride-along. The night we responded to a stroke victim stuck behind an illegally parked van, I realized obstruction isn't just rude. It can be dangerous, even deadly. Her voice trembled. I realized that the world doesn't revolve around me, and it shouldn't. Caprio nodded, studying her, really studying her. And the most important lesson, he asked. That I don't want to be someone who hides behind my father's badge, she said. I want to be someone who earns her own respect. The gallery fell completely quiet. Even Chief Kane, sitting in the back row, unnoticed until that moment, had his eyes on his daughter with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Judge Caprio closed the folder gently. Thank you, Miss Kane, he said. That was sincere, and sincerity is the first step toward change. Briana exhaled shakily. Caprio reviewed the logs aloud. 160 community service hours completed, 4 workshops co-assisted, 1 overnight police ride-along completed, PSA script approved, paperwork validated, reflection submitted. You've fulfilled the requirements of the accountability plan, he said. But whether the contract is complete depends on whether the lesson is internalized. He paused. That decision, he said, I am satisfied to make today. Briana's fingers tightened around her folder. I am remitting $220 of the state amount, Caprio said. You will pay the remaining balance, $320, in monthly installments over 6 months. She nodded. Yes, Your Honor. But, he added softly, I want to address something more important than fines. He looked directly at her father. Chief Kane, would you like to speak? Harold Kane didn't expect that. He stood slowly, almost reluctantly. The entire courtroom shifted its attention toward him. He cleared his throat. Your Honor, for years, I thought protecting my daughter meant shielding her from consequences. I thought, if I took the pressure for her, she would have an easier life. He looked at Briana, really looked at her. But I understand now that I was teaching her the wrong lesson. I wasn't preparing her for the world. I was insulating her from it. He swallowed hard, and when my office contacted the court the day of the citation, it wasn't Briana who called. It was me. I ordered those calls. A wave of shock passed through the courtroom. Briana froze. Her face fell. I did it out of habit, he continued. I assumed wrongly that I should always intervene, that I was expected to. But that instinct hurt my daughter. It sent the message that she didn't have to stand on her own. He lifted his chin with quiet resolve. I want to apologize to the court and to my daughter. Briana's eyes filled with tears, not from shame, but from something deeper. Recognition, understanding, release. She whispered, Dad, but he shook his head. No more fixing things for you. You don't need me to do that. I see that now. Judge Caprio regarded them both, his voice warm but firm. Chief Kane, acknowledging your role is essential. Accountability doesn't stop at the defendant's table. He looked at Briana again. You stopped renting power, he said, and started building character. That is a greater victory than any sentence I could impose. Her breath shook as she nodded. I'm proud of you for completing this process, Caprio said gently, but I'm more proud that you learned from it. Then, for the first time since she entered the courtroom that morning, Briana allowed herself to smile small, fragile, but real. As she stepped back from the bench, something unexpected happened. Officer Navarro approached her. He extended his hand. Good work, he said simply. Briana stared at his hand for a moment, then shook it. Thank you, she whispered. Miguel Santos, still on the speakerphone line, added quietly, and thank you for helping with the deliveries. We noticed. Briana smiled again, more confidently this time. She had stepped out from behind her father's shadow. She had walked straight through consequences she once thought she would never face. And she had come out the other side changed, not perfect, not fully healed, but transformed, and the courtroom felt it. The story wasn't ending, it was evolving. In the months that followed, the effects of Briana Kane's case rippled far beyond a courtroom bench. What began as a single act of entitlement one-block truck, one threat toward an officer, had exposed a fault line the whole city now had to reckon with. And Judge Frank Caprio, who had long believed justice should illuminate rather than punish, made sure the light stayed on. The first change came quietly. A public log published every Friday afternoon on the municipal court's website. At first, hardly anyone noticed it, just a link labeled External Case Contact Report. It listed every attempt made by outside parties to influence cases. Week 1, 2 calls. One from a councilman's assistant. One from a local business owner trying to clarify the ticket of his nephew. Week 2, 5 attempts, 3 voicemails from the same number. By week 6, the log was being shared across community forums. Citizens began reading it the way some people check sports scores. Reporters started asking questions. City officials began feeling the friction. They could no longer lean on quiet favors. The message was clear. Influence wasn't invisible anymore. And if influence was no longer hiding in shadows, then neither could the people who feared retaliation for rejecting it. The retaliation shield policy, inspired directly by Officer Navarro's case, rolled out next. Officers could now submit confidential reports if they felt pressured, intimidated, or threatened with reassignment related to a citation or arrest. In the first 3 months, 2 officers filed reports. Neither case made headlines. That was the point. They were handled quietly, respectfully, and with more protection than the department had ever offered. Officer Navarro himself didn't file anything, but he felt something shift in the precinct, new kind of confidence, not loud or boastful, just present. He no longer hesitated when citing people with connections. He no longer worried about unseen hands pulling strings behind him, and he gave credit where it was due. One morning, while grabbing coffee with a colleague, he said, "That girl Conache changed more than she knows." Meanwhile, a second wave of change rolled out across the city. The Delivery and Access Zone Enforcement Guide, the very one Judge Caprio had demanded agencies create together. It standardized response times, clarified when vehicles should be towed, and laid out scripts for officers to use to prevent escalation. Traffic supervisors later reported that compliance improved by 30%. Not miracles, but movement. At the heart of these reforms, however, was something more subtle, more human. The PSA Briana scripted and narrated had begun circulating in driver education programs at high schools and community centers. It wasn't dramatic. There was no slow-motion footage, no heavy music, no attempt to make her look heroic. The video opened simply with Briana's voice. How you park affects more people than you think. It showed a delivery driver losing a time window, a mother circling a hospital lot while carrying a toddler, an ambulance slowed by a car parked too close to a hydrant. Nothing exaggerated, just truthful. Teachers liked it because it was real. Teenagers liked it because it didn't preach, and the city liked it because it worked. One afternoon, a delivery driver emailed the court. "I showed this video to my nephew," he wrote. "He never understood why delivery zones existed. Now he does." Another seed planted, another ripple. But the most meaningful changes were the ones Briana never saw, or never knew she caused. On a bright Saturday morning, Miguel Santos stood inside the warehouse sorting inventory when he noticed a new trainee struggling with a pallet jack. Miguel walked over and helped him reposition the equipment properly. "You'll get the hang of it," he said. The trainee nodded nervously. "Thanks. I saw that PSA online, the one with the girl talking about delivery windows. My mom made me watch it. Didn't know you guys had such tight deadlines." Miguel chuckled. "Most people don't." When the trainee walked away, Miguel paused, reflecting on how strange life was, how one young woman's mistake had spiraled into education for thousands. He didn't feel vindictive, not anymore. He felt hopeful. And then there was the moment no one could have predicted. One evening, months after finishing her community service, Briana was walking down Westminster Street dressed casually, earbuds in, when she spotted a car angled toward a delivery zone. A driver inside eased forward, ready to squeeze into the space behind a truck. It reminded her of herself, months ago. Too much of herself. She jogged over and tapped the window lightly. The driver lowered it, annoyed. "Hey," Briana said gently, "that truck has a permit. He's in his delivery window. If you park behind him, he won't be able to get out. Maybe try the other side of the block." The driver frowned, then glanced at the truck and saw the permit. "Oh, I didn't notice." He pulled away, without argument. Briana stepped back onto the sidewalk, heart beating oddly fast. She hadn't done it for recognition, not for redemption. But because now she understood. And that understanding changed her. That evening, she sat at her desk and stared at her old reflection paper, the one she had written for Judge Caprio. She added something new at the bottom. Change doesn't happen when someone forces you. It happens when you decide you don't want to be the person you were yesterday. Her father walked by her door and paused. "Writing." "Just thinking," she said. He nodded and left her to her thoughts. But in the doorway, unseen by her, he smiled, not the proud smile of a police chief whose daughter escaped consequence, but the quiet smile of a father who finally saw his daughter stand on her own feet. Across the city, Judge Caprio continued presiding over cases with the same gentle strength he'd shown for decades. One late Friday afternoon, he finished his last hearing of the week. The courtroom emptied until only he, the clerk, and the custodian remained. He walked to the bulletin board behind his bench and pinned a fresh note card. A new principle for a new chapter. Power that listens becomes service. Power that refuses becomes cruelty. He stepped back, looking at the words for a long moment. They weren't for Briana alone. They were for the city, the courtroom staff, the officers, the students, the delivery drivers, the people who watched the case unfold and saw themselves reflected in its lessons. He switched off the lights, the courtroom falling into a calm glow of dusk. As he locked the door behind him, he felt something lighter in the air, something earned, not granted, not justice handed down, justice grown. And somewhere in the city, a young woman who once thought she owned the world was growing too. Her story had begun with arrogance. It ended with accountability. And in between, there was hope. In the real world, most of us don't walk around with a police chief for a parent. But all of us, in some way, carry privilege, some advantage we didn't earn, or a comfort we didn't notice. Briana's story reminds us that privilege becomes dangerous the moment we stop seeing the people we affect. Accountability isn't punishment, it's clarity. It's the mirror that shows us who we are and who we have the chance to become. Think about a moment when you may have overlooked someone else's struggle because you assumed your needs mattered more. What would you do differently today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe in stories that challenge power and uplift character, Hit subscribe to join us for the next case.